The purpose of this video is to help other women who suspect that they might be autistic, but they haven't yet received the validation or the recognition that they deserve. So before I start, a few things, just bear with me because I've never really done this before, so I'll have to keep reminding myself to look at the camera. I might be a bit fidgety, so I've got my little toy corny here. Moral support. And also this is purely informational, so I'm literally just speaking from my lived experience as a woman who suspects that she's autistic. And I'm not a medical professional, so yeah, in no way use this as a diagnostic tool. So yeah, that being said, let's go. So I am a 27-year-old woman living just outside of London. A therapist flagged to me just over a year ago that I should really look into an autism assessment. She flagged some autistic traits during kind of a period of therapy sessions I had with her. I was actually working through a breakup at the time, and also some kind of childhood trauma work. And I was asking my therapist for some help working through this trait of really struggling with letting go of grudges, especially with people closest to me, and kind of linked to this being too sensitive. So I've always been called too sensitive, and that I kind of can't take a joke. I take things to heart a lot of the time, which means I struggle to let go of things. And during this therapy session, the therapist flagged to me, she said, "Lara, these seem like autistic traits. Like, have you ever thought of autism before?" And to be honest, it was the first time it had even crossed my mind. There are members of my family who are a lot more autistic than me. Obviously that term is thrown around so much, but me, myself, it's never been on the radar, despite having had kind of many mental health struggles throughout my teens and 20s and adult life. So that was the light bulb moment for me. Even though I didn't know much about autism, especially level 1 autism, when the therapist said it, something in my brain clicked and told me to look into it. So obviously went into hyper-focus mode, research. I remember just spending all night researching autism, especially in late diagnosed women. And everything I was reading was resonating with me. And I kind of sat with this with myself for a while because there was that self-stigma towards myself, and I didn't quite understand how I could go this long without knowing this information. And I think it must have been after a few weeks of like obsessively researching autism in women and also looking for support online. So I went on TikTok a lot and looked at a lot of videos of women who I resonated with, who were late diagnosed, and I shared a lot of their experiences. And it was only once I was maybe 30% sure that I could be autistic that I kind of told my family. Like, I kind of said it not as a joke, but I said, "Oh guys, like, I think I'm autistic," to which ever since then, so it's been kind of over a year now, I haven't received any support at all. And I'm not saying this for pity or sympathy, I'm saying it just to highlight how long this journey has been since I've self-identified as being autistic, but two, how lonely it's been to navigate it alone. And I don't feel like anybody should have to navigate that experience alone, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing mine. So after that initial kind of backlash of like, oh no, you receive all the comments like, oh no, you're the least autistic person ever, like, you love a deep chat. And I love a deep chat. I'm so curious in people. I can't do small talk, but I love a deep chat. I'm so good with people. I've always worked in customer service, and I began to question it myself. I began to doubt, well, maybe I'm not autistic, like maybe I do just have social anxiety, because one of the challenges I have is really, really struggling in social situations, really struggling to socialise. But all of the challenges that I have are massively internal, and you would only really recognise them if you lived with me or you knew me really well, because I would say I mask 99% of the time. When I'm out of my flat, I am masking, and this is something that I've identified with doing my whole life, or at least my early teens, which is when I noticed I was really struggling in social situations. And that was when I thought, oh my goodness, like, I have to pretend to be someone I'm not. But I think this was massively subconscious. This wasn't a conscious decision to mask who I was. But I think what's made it really confusing is, over time, my personality has become someone who masks. So I have developed all sorts of coping strategies and what I now know as self-regulation tools to manage my anxiety around being autistic, which I always thought was just me being anxious, an anxious people pleaser person. For example, I love yoga. I do yoga most days, and I can't really like go into a social situation or go into a professional work situation or whatever without doing yoga. I also meditate every day, and I journal obsessively, and I've actually kept a journal since the age of 10. So those are my like core things that I use to cope. And in more recent years, I've really turned to writing. So as you can probably tell, I'm a massive oversharer. Really struggle not to overshare. It's almost like I don't know where to stop, which has got me into some interesting like dates in the past, and just social situations when I'm sharing my whole life story in the first 10 minutes of meeting someone. But what I now know is that is a trait of mine, because I really struggle with kind of surface level conversation, and actually when I overshare, I'm wanting that back for myself. Like I am seeking that kind of connection. Anyway, the reason I'm kind of sharing all of this, I guess, is because there are so many traits and things I can identify in my personality and just who I am, which I have lived with for 27 years, that I can now see over this past year, after reading multiple books on masking autism, listened to, oh my God, hundreds of podcasts, followed Instagram accounts, TikToks, all sorts of social media accounts, which are so useful. And yet it's still sad that even after knowing deep in my core that I am autistic, albeit level 1 autistic, so I don't have as high support needs as level 2 or level 3 autistic. And even though I'm not diagnosed yet, even though I don't have that piece of paper saying I am autistic, it is the one thing in my life that makes sense. But even though I know that to be true for myself, I still feel like I need that piece of paper to validate my experience to everybody else. And the implication of that is the effect it has on your mental health. So I have struggled with my mental health, as I mentioned, since my early teens. And I've been taking a high dose of antidepressants for the past 5 years. And since learning about autism and self-identifying as being autistic, I now realise that the antidepressants aren't going to work. The generalised anxiety, the kind of depression, I'm not really anxious, I'm not really depressed. I just don't fit in to the world around me, or I perceive myself not to fit into the world around me sometimes. And that's why I haven't even been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but that's why I'm taking these medications. And every time I go to the doctors, they say it's just, anxiety, depression, and trauma because of what I've been through, which is a whole nother video. But I know that in my experience, I wouldn't have the mental health struggles that I do if I knew that my brain just worked a little bit differently and I could ask for accommodations and I didn't have to push myself 24/7 to live up to this standard of a person that I expect myself to be, but really struggle. And this means that I have had countless periods of burnout. I have been through so many jobs, jobs that I should have thrived in, but didn't, because I didn't feel able to ask for the accommodations that I deserved. And actually, more recently, when I did ask for the accommodations that I knew I deserved, they were denied because I didn't have a diagnosis and I appear fine, because my ability to mask is quite exceptional, I think, and I need to look into the research a little bit more, but I actually feel like the more you mask, the lonelier your experience of being autistic, or let alone undiagnosed autistic, is, because you feel this disconnect between what you know to be true for you and who you are and the world around you and what they expect of you. And for me, that's been the most difficult thing to come to terms with, and that's why I'm so desperate for a diagnosis, because I can't see an alternative. I can't see an alternative for me to go through life and feel empowered to ask for what I need without having the label as being autistic, because from the outside I don't look like I need any support. And that makes me sad, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing my experience, because you do deserve support. Every person who is autistic whether you're level 1, level 2, level 3, deserves support to varying degrees. And yes, I might need a lot less support than others, and I'm so privileged and I'm so grateful, and I feel so fortunate to be able to have got this far in life without asking for support. But it has also had massive implications on my mental health and feelings of loneliness. And loneliness can be so chronic. I have experienced chronic loneliness on and off throughout my teens and 20s, and there is more and more research coming out about the effect of loneliness on your physical health. For example, chronic loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which, if you think about it, is just, it's awful that isn't taken more seriously. And when you add undiagnosed autism into the mix, and the effect that being undiagnosed and invalidated has on your mental health, your self-esteem, your ability to connect with others, something needs to be done about it, because practically and systemically the system is broken. I have been on the waiting list for an autism assessment since January, the beginning of January, and I live in the UK, so I went through Right to Choose. I learnt about Right to Choose through TikTok, I think. Someone recommended it to me. And I went to my GP, asked for a referral for Right to Choose, and finally got onto the waiting list. It was much harder than it should have been, but I did it, and I was told at the time that the waiting list times were 4.5 months. So I worked out I should have heard back at the beginning of June. So I obviously marked in my calendar, June 2nd, hear about autism assessment, and I didn't. And ironically, as someone, for an autistic person, the uncertainty of being told a date when you'll hear back about something or be expecting something and then it not happening is quite difficult to adjust to. I've always been quite rigid. That's something I struggle with. So obviously I sent an email to this provider saying, I was expecting to hear about my autism assessment today or this week, to which they replied, you'll hear back in 2 weeks. So again, marked it in my calendar, autism assessment, 2 weeks. I can deal with that. It's only 2 weeks. At this point, I was still really struggling at work and waiting for this autism assessment to kind of advocate for my needs in the workplace. 2 weeks passed, checking my emails obsessively, still no sign. Emailed again, there's no phone number for this provider. Emailed again saying, I appreciate the waiting times, but I was expecting to hear back by this date. This was the information that I received. And I received an email back saying, quite a kind of standard, copy and paste email saying, sorry, but there's a backlog of assessments. The booking team are working through them in date order. You just kind of have to be patient. And I just had to accept that. And at this point, I was really, really struggling at work, really, really struggling. And it got to the point where I had to leave my job because I wasn't receiving the support that I needed. I was so burnt out from all of the overwhelm, overstimulating environment I was in. no one understood, no one was trying to understand, and I just couldn't cope anymore. So I quit, which I have done in multiple jobs in the past. And I'm now in kind of a state of recovering from burnout, looking for more remote jobs, and most importantly, a workplace that appreciates neurodiversity and accepts that. So it has now been almost 2 months since I was meant to hear back about my autism assessment, and I still haven't. So I'm navigating this kind of really uncertain limbo time all by myself with no support. And it is becoming more and more apparent to me just how many women out there just like me are struggling alone. I'm so fortunate in being able to seek out support groups. So I do go to a support group once a week, which is accessible even if you're self-diagnosed autistic, which is incredible, I think. But actually, what I think really needs to change is this kind of overall attitude and ignorance towards autism, no matter what level autism you have. And I genuinely think that if you suspect you are autistic, and you know that to be true in yourself, that should be a valid experience. It really should, and it should be taken seriously too. But unfortunately, it's not. And that's why I think the link between undiagnosed autism, loneliness, and mental health struggles need to be taken more seriously, and that starts with talking about it. So I'm really sorry for the rambles and how long this video was and how unstructured it was, because I appreciate it was kind of all over the place, but I wanted to just share my experience, really, just in case it resonates with anybody who might be going through something similar or might feel like they're the only one experiencing the kind of not only frustration at the wait times for diagnoses and assessments, but the emotional toll it takes on yourself and your mental health and your ability to show up in the world and function as normal, because it is such a, when you know, and when it feels like such a massive part of your identity which isn't taken seriously, it's really hard. I can't put into words how difficult it is. So if you're going through the same, I see you. I'm here. Follow me on Instagram. My handle is @_the Lonely Club. I have a community on there for young adults navigating loneliness, and this is such an important aspect and nuanced aspect of my experience, which I'm now gaining clarity on, has been such a massive part of why I've experienced so much loneliness in my teens and 20s. So on that note, you're not alone, and I really hope this helps.